Hi, welcome to Echoes from the Satellite. I'm your host, Karen. And today we're going to talk about long ago days back when giants roamed the earth. I'm talking about looking at the science fictional dinosaur. Now, I will say that Richard at Vintage SF had mentioned that he was going to read this book about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe longer than that, actually. And when he made mention of that, I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting because, um, I couldn't think of a lot of sci-fi books that had dinosaurs in it. I could think of a lot of sci-fi movies. There were a lot of movies in the 50s, all the way up to, of course, Jurassic Park. And I knew I had read Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park when it came out. It was a big topic of conversation, and I recalled reading that, but I couldn't really think of a lot of other novels that I had read, or any novels I had read with dinosaurs in it. So when Richard brought this up, I thought, oh, that could be a really interesting book to read. So I know he's doing it as part of something called Dino-vember, which sounds really cool. I'm not a part of that. I'm just doing this on my own. And I know that he just got his video out a couple of days ago. So I'm dying to see his video, but I didn't want to watch it before I gave my review. So I'm sure Richard has done a great job, and I'll put a link to his video in the show notes. But yeah, I didn't want to see that and steer my review in any particular direction. But make sure you go watch what Richard has to say about the book. So yeah, like I said, this kind of filled in a blank spot for me because, as I said, I didn't read a lot of books about dinosaurs, although I didn't always enjoy dinosaurs as a kid. And what we have here, I'll give you a little closer view. Now, I bought this off of Thrift Books. I just bought this edition. I don't think I paid more than like $9 for it. You can see there is a huge crease in the cover, and it has been well read. But yeah, it's totally readable version. I want to talk about the editors of this book. So there's 3 editors. There's Robert Silverberg, there's Charles G. Waugh, and there's Martin Harry Greenberg, not to be confused with Martin Greenberg. There's 2 different individuals with very similar names. And so this book came out from Avon, which I believe is part of the HarperCollins line, or may have been purchased by HarperCollins. This came out in 1982. And Robert Silverberg, I was familiar with as an author, but the other 2 editors I really didn't know about. So I did some poking around online. I looked at the Science Fiction Encyclopedia and at Wikipedia. And so Charles Waugh seems to have been primarily involved in as an editor in anthologies. And so he collaborated quite a bit with Martin Harry Greenberg on anthologies. He also collaborated with Isaac Asimov a lot in anthologies. And actually, the 3 of them, Asimov, Waugh, and Greenberg, also did, and I'll put the picture up for this, a book called The Science Fictional Solar System, and that was in 1979, so that predated this book. And no, I haven't read that, so I don't know what that's all about. But they actually worked together. And Martin Harry Greenberg, this is an interesting guy. You should look him up. I didn't go too deep into learning about him, but he just was an editor on an immense number of anthologies, 1,298 anthologies in his lifetime. He did 127 anthologies with Asimov and 193 anthologies with Waugh. So these guys were really well connected with each other, with the sci-fi community. Greenberg also, in his other career as a university professor, was an expert on terrorism. And to top this all off, he co-founded the Sci-Fi Channel. So I actually would like to do a little more reading into Martin Harry Greenberg, not to be confused with Martin Greenberg, who was the publisher of Gnome Press. So this gets a little convoluted. But some interesting guys here, especially Greenberg. And it's interesting how they're all connected to Asimov too. And you'll note that there are two Asimov stories in this book. So now let's talk about the book. Let's look at the stories in this book. As I said, there are 9 stories in this book, and they range from the years of 1950 to 1980. Again, this was published in 82. Now, I will say, I don't think there are any stories in this book that I thought were like just mind-blowing, incredible stories, fabulous stories. But there's some very enjoyable stories in this anthology. And I think it's like most anthologies, you'll have, 2 or 3 stories that are pretty good. You'll have some that are, good, and then maybe a couple that, don't really do much for you. So this first story is The Wings of a Bat. This is by Paul Ash, who's actually Pauline Ashwell. So we have a woman publishing under a pseudonym, and this was from 1966. This story takes place in the Cretaceous. So most of these stories, you either have the option of time traveling back to the past or bringing the dinosaurs into the present or the future, right? And it involved a mining crew sent back to the past, and they're dealing with dinosaurs, and they sort of have a situation where a baby pteranodon, one of the winged dinosaurs, and excuse me, I'm not a dinosaur expert. This is my disclaimer, I'm not a dinosaur expert, so I may not always have all the names of the dinosaurs right, but they take in this pteranodon as a baby and feed it, and then it goes off. And then later on, I don't want to give the whole story away, but it does some things that saves the lives of these miners. So kind of an interesting turnabout there. And it was interesting. I went back and looked and found that this was actually nominated for a Nebula for Best Novelette at the time. And so little surprising. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was fabulous. So interesting to find out that. The next story is by Harry Harrison. It's called The Ever-Branching Tree. This is from 1970. Essentially, it's about a elementary school class that's able to visit different ages of prehistory. They sort of project themselves back, but they're not really time traveling. They're just sort of immaterial. They're like ghosts who are able to see what's happening in different time periods. And kind of the frustration of the teacher with his students. And it's kind of, I think it's sort of a cute story. I thought the ending was a little weak. I didn't feel like you got much of a payoff, but it was sort of an interesting story. Now, this third story is one that really I had a lot of mixed feelings about. When Time Was New by Robert F. Young. This is from 1964, and I think this is the longest story in the book. And I looked up Young because I'd never heard of him before, and I guess he worked a lot of odd jobs, including a job as like a school janitor, so that he could do his writing. And he wrote for over 30 years. I had never read any books by him, but he did a lot of short stories, not only in a lot of the science fiction magazines of the time, but in Saturday Evening Post, Playboy, all sorts of Colliers and things like that. He only did 5 novels, and those were all in the 1980s. And so this story, at first, I kind of enjoyed it because I thought it was a little bit of a spoof or a takeoff on sort of classic pulp stories. The protagonist is going back into the Cretaceous, and he's riding around in what they call a triceratank, which almost sounded like a cyborg triceratops, and he's fighting these folks from Mars, and it was extremely goofy, but fun. But then it takes this weird turn, takes this really weird turn where these kids, he rescues this boy and this girl, and they're both preteens. I think the girl is like 11 or 12, something like that. And then the girl winds up I don't want to, it's a spoiler alert. I'm just going to give you a spoiler alert. Later on, because of time travel, she shows up grown up and she's been the girl that he's had this crush on the whole time. And there's just some weird flirting and stuff. And I don't know, it just became extremely creepy. It just became like really, really creepy. Um, so it was disappointing because otherwise it was like a really fun takeoff on the pulps, and then it took a left turn that I really would rather turn right than left. So yeah, that was a rough one. The next story was by Brian Aldiss, Poor Little Warrior, 1958. Um, Man, this is a dinosaur hunt in the Jurassic, and all I can say is this is the first time I ever thought about dinosaur parasites. And that's about all I want to say about it. I read it. It was potent, and I'll never want to read it again. so so that's that. Um, Asimov's first story in this book is the next one, Day of the Hunters. Um, I really liked this story. I'm not always a big Asimov fan, but this one was really entertaining. And this is sort of, there's two story. I think it's just two. There's two stories in the book that have or posit intelligent dinosaurs or intelligent sort of humanoid dinosaurs. And this one is set in a bar, and it's really interesting. Three guys in a bar. This sounds like the beginning of a joke, but it's not. These three guys are sitting there and they wind up talking to this professor, and he starts telling them this crazy story about he travels back in time and he encounters these intelligent, like reptilian people, and it's a really interesting story, and I have to tip my hat to Asimov on this one anyway. This was a really good story. I enjoyed that one a lot. The next one, Hermes to the Ages by Frederick Gottfried. I have never heard of him, and I didn't actually look him up, so that's my bad. This was fairly long. This was from 1980. It was an interesting story, but it sort of felt like it was overly long to me. I felt like it was stretched out a bit. But I'll give him the premise on this one. A bit of a mystery. It's set in a Cold War situation in the future when there's still Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviets, and there's a discovery of a body on the moon, which is non-human, which is reptilian. I don't want to get too much further into it because there is this mystery, but it's interesting, but like I said, a little bit overlong for me, but still an interesting story. The next Asimov story is A Statue for Father. This is from 1958. And this is another one I can't really say much, except they're bringing something back from prehistoric times. And this felt like an overlong joke. This was a little too cute. So that's about all I have to say about that story. The next one is Wildcat by Paul Anderson from 1958. This was a really interesting story. And one of the longer ones, I think it's 33 pages. This is again another one set back in the Cretaceous. Men are sent back to extract oil, to get oil and send it back to the future, to present time. In the present time, there is a war going on. So again, it's that Cold War premise, only it's become a hot war. And in order to get the oil, they're having to deal with all of these dinosaurs. You know, some of them are they're not man eaters, but they just trample around and they have to deal with the sort of random destruction caused by these gigantic reptiles. And then at other times they have, the carnivorous dinosaurs that they have to deal with. So that's going on. Plus, they have all of the things going on that impact human beings when they are in a dangerous environment, when they are far away from society and so forth. So there's a lot of psychological and other things going on. Honestly, before I looked up the year that it was written, I would have thought maybe this was written during Vietnam because of a lot of the um, sort of social or psychological things that were referenced. Um, I thought it was a really good story. I thought towards the end it maybe started to run out of gas a little bit, but I thought Wildcat was maybe one of the better um, long entries in the book. And then finally, our last story in the book is by Robert Silverberg, one of the editors. He gets to take the last place in the book with a story called Our Lady of the Sauropods, and this was from 1980. And this definitely felt like a 70s story to me. Of everything in the book, that felt like, oh yeah, that's the newest story. I mean, that it was um, definitely had a lot more to do with I don't want to say metaphysical things, but yeah, sort of metaphysical things. It reminded me much more of the things that were being written at that time by like Le Guin or Zelazny, um, kind of pulling us away from sort of the hard SF and into, a different realm of SF. And this involved a woman who winds up, she's trapped in this artificial environment that's orbiting, I think it's orbiting Earth, but it's created for these dinosaurs that have been um, uh, brought back to life via genetics and biotechnology. So that sounds very much like Crichton. And she has sort of this, I don't know if it's a I don't want to give everything away. It's sort of a revelation, a sort of almost a spiritual experience while she's there with these dinosaurs. I thought it was a very interesting story. I liked it. I didn't think it was maybe the best story in the book, but it was by far the most unique story in the book. So there you have it. You've got 9 stories in the science fictional dinosaur. And if you're one of those people who enjoy this kind of thing, um, it also includes a geologic timescale, a glossary, selected reptiles, and further reading. So anytime you're reading and you're saying, gee, when did this happen? What time period were these dinosaurs around? You can just reference the back of the book and you'll have it all cleared up. So it was a really fun read. Um, I can recommend it, and especially if you're interested in dinosaurs, I think it would be an obvious read, and it's got a good variety of stories in it. I think, if you read one and you're kind of on it, the next one will probably be more interesting to you. Moving on, I'm going to start reading. I know I mentioned this before. Andre Norton. So Andre Norton is an author that I read a lot when I was younger, and then I haven't read much Andre Norton. Well, honestly, I haven't read any Andre Norton in years. Um, and then I thought, well, I don't hear much about Andre Norton nowadays. So I really thought that's kind of a shame because I felt like Andre Norton um, was a really prolific and a really good author. So I picked up the Time Traders. I had this. This is still my original copy. Boy, it is kind of chewed up. I may be on the lookout for a newer copy. But I'm going to start with the Time Traders and see where we go from there. I really love this cover. This could have been in my top 10 covers too. Um, so we'll start with Time Traders and see where that takes us with Andre Norton. But that's about it for me now. I hope that you guys enjoyed the look at the dinosaur book, and now I'm going to rush over and look at Richard at Vintage SF's review. But anyway, hope you're all reading some good books and staying well, and getting ready for holidays. And anyway, thanks a lot for coming to the channel, and I hope to see you again real soon.